On today's episode of the Locked On NHL podcast, turns out all it took to get Jason Robertson going was Roope Hintz. We'll talk about Edmonton letting go of a 2-0 lead and a couple of new hires in the Western Conference on today's episode of the Locked On NHL podcast. We're your team every day.
You're Locked On NHL, your daily podcast on the National Hockey League. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up? What's happening, everybody? Welcome into another episode of the Locked On NHL podcast. We are your team every day, and we thank you for making Locked On NHL your first listen each and every day. Make sure you subscribe on YouTube if you like to watch the show so you don't miss out on any new episodes, and make sure to subscribe on your favorite audio platforms as well so you can listen on your phone, in the car, on the go, wherever you tune in. We got you covered. Today's episode of Locked On NHL is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. On today's episode of the Locked On NHL podcast, we will discuss a 2-0 lead squandered by the Edmonton Oilers as they fall 5-3 in Game 3 of the Western Conference Finals. We'll talk about the return of Roope Hintz and the, not surprising, return of Jason Robertson to the score sheets. And we'll also talk about a couple of new hires in the Western Conference and what it means for the one spot left. My name is Seth Toupal, host of Locked On Wild, one half of the dynamic duo, joined by JD Young of Locked On Sharks. And JD, one thing that both you and I did not fail to do was to protect a 2-0 lead. How about the Dallas Stars making the charge, making the comeback, and turning it from a 2-0 deficit into a 5-3 win? Nice little pushback by Dallas after a bit of a rough start.
Yeah, this looked like a disaster class from Dallas to start this game. When they had 3 shots on goal. That's, again, you never go full Sharks. They went full Sharks in the first period, getting 3 shots on goal. But just an incredible mental fortitude, whatever you want to call it, leadership, or maybe just good players playing well in the second period for Dallas. And they dominated that second period at 5v5 from our good friends at Natural Stat Trick. They had a 2.05 expected goals for in the second period alone after showing up with a 0.31 in the first period. Just did whatever they wanted to. And this is why this team, I think, is going to win the cup this year, because it doesn't matter. It's just every night it's somebody else, right? Roope Hintz comes back, and look, Jason Robertson is Jason Robertson again. You have Wyatt Johnson. You have so many guys where it's just every night they take a turn, and they've seen it all, they've done it all. It doesn't matter. It's being down 2-0 in that crazy environment in Edmonton, and Dallas was just like, whatever, man, we got this.
Yeah, it was just weird seeing Jason Robertson, as quiet as he has been throughout these playoffs, had just 1 point in the 2 games so far in the Western Conference Finals. And yes, he did rack up a bunch of assists in the series against Colorado. He had 6 assists in that series, but no goals. And you look at it, and I don't think it's a coincidence that Roope Hintz goes out of the lineup in that Colorado series, misses the first 2 games of this series. He comes back, that natural order slots in for the Dallas Stars, and then Robertson has the 3 goals. But it just seems like Dallas is equipped to handle really anything. Player out of the lineup. Okay, let's just slot a couple of other guys in. Yeah. Early deficit. Don't play very well at all. Like, okay, we'll just shake that off. And we'll just continue to play good hockey here to get back into this game. And you look at how this series has unfolded so far. Things have been pretty tight in this series, and I think a lot of people expected that, we're going to get a slugfest here. Going to get a bunch of goals because this is two talented offenses. The Edmonton Oilers led by McDavid and Draisaitl. Dallas with their waves of depth that they can hit you with. And all these games so far, Oilers win game 1, 3-2. The Stars come back and win game 2, 3-1. Like, things have been pretty tight. And this is where we go back to, even when Jake Ottinger has nights like tonight where he gives up those 2 early goals, he's a good enough goalie to be able to calm things down and to allow his team to get back into it. And so, as much impact as Roope Hintz had coming back into the lineup, you always look to your goalie to be able to kind of steady things, especially when they don't go according to plan right away.
Yeah, and with Ottinger, I don't even really fault him for the start because he was playing well. He was just facing an onslaught from Edmonton. And I like the way Edmonton came out and started this game, where you lose game 2, you're trying to get that momentum back. You're back home. You have to come out strong to this game. If Dallas had started this game strong, you felt like maybe this could have been the end of this series right away. Edmonton set the pace, but they couldn't get that dagger kill like shot. And I think that they're going to be looking at that we could have gone into the first period with a 3-0 lead here and really put Dallas on the ropes here. But with the way Dallas has been playing and the way, Skinner, who gave up 3 goals here, and should have had a 4th if it wasn't for Darnell Nurse, his butt, which we could probably spend 20 minutes talking about that play. But this felt like very much Dallas kind of just taking the wind out of Edmonton's sails, and Edmonton again kind of missing some opportunities here to take a 2-1 series lead.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up that point about when you go up against a heavyweight and you land a couple of punches, but you don't land that knockout.
Yep.
It seems like every single time it comes back to bite you. And to your point on Jake Ottinger, that Zach Hyman goal was weird. It was just weird. Like it's a 2-inch putt. If you're a golfer, it's a 2-inch putt. Like you barely have to tap on the golf ball to get it to go in. Yeah,
tap.
You just blow on it and it falls into the cup. So you give up one of those, and
McDavid one was an own goal that McDavid same thing, just kind of slide. There's like 2 inches of space, and the puck just kind of slides right in there. Like if it's a half a second later, like he gets his skate over and blocks that. But yeah, like I don't really fault him for either of those goals because they're kind of fluky goals. But again, this time of year, they don't ask how, they just ask how many, and Edmonton was able to get 2 fluky goals.
Yeah, and that's the other part of it too, is you get opportunities like that as Edmonton. You gotta take advantage of a goalie being like, hey, what am I supposed to do here? Like, what am I supposed to do when they're scoring goals like this? And they just didn't do it. Tale as old as time. Just 2-0 lead, and next thing you know, it's 4-2, and you're like, wait, what happened? So we'll talk
3-3. They did tie. It was 3-3. They did tie. We did have a tie game entirely. And then I thought you were worried. For a minute, I was worried about you because we've gotten a lot of playoff hockey, and I know as West Coast people, we do get to enjoy that this game is over at 8:30 or after 8:00 p.m. at the rest of the night. I know you guys in the Midwest on the East Coast having to stay up late for these games. I don't envy you guys.
I'm just glad this one started at 7:30
and no overtime for Seth. Great night.
Thank you. But yes, thank you. It was 3-3, but it felt like after 2-0, it felt like Edmonton just completely lost the handle on it. As we'll talk about here, and we'll also go into a really interesting call that honestly I'm surprised actually went the way that it did. Embellishment by Mason Marchment. Yay or nay? We'll talk about that. And are we concerned about the Oilers at this point in the series? All that coming up on today's episode of the Locked On NHL podcast. Once again, we are your team every day. Today's episode of the Locked On NHL podcast is brought to you by Game Time. And if you're somebody who loves to live spontaneously and you want to try to get tickets for the NBA Finals, Game Time can help you make that a possibility. Game Time makes getting NBA Finals tickets even faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to tip-off. Yes, if you've looked on any other ticket apps over the years for a game of this magnitude, you probably laugh at the price, but Game Time is here to make it a reality. And not only does Game Time allow you ticket prices that go down the closer you get to the event, get a load of some of this. They've got flash deals where you can save even more with exclusive in-app deals on select seats ahead of the game of the event. Zone deals where you choose a section and Game Time will choose the seats for you. All that and their lowest price guarantee. If you find tickets that are cheaper, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. Take the guesswork out of buying NBA Finals tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Welcome back to today's episode of the Locked On NHL podcast. Once again, we're your team every day, and we thank you for making Locked On NHL your first listen each and every day. Make sure to stay tuned throughout the week as we've got the full array of hosts here on Locked On NHL, whether it be talking NHL at large on Mondays and Fridays, Western Conference Tuesdays, as you're listening to right now, Eastern Conference Wednesday, or Power Rankings Thursday. We've got you covered. So make sure to subscribe wherever you listen. We are glad to have you on board. All right, JD, let's talk a little bit more about this game because there was a crucial call that was made. Now, it more so just turned into a 4-on-4.
Yeah.
But I still was surprised that they handed Mason Marchment an embellishment call on that cross-checking penalty to Zach Hyman, because the way it looked in real time, it was like, oh man, that is a decision by Zach Hyman, but turns out both guys went to the box. Were you as surprised as I was about that call, or are you glad that the officials went that route? Because it's not the first time the Dallas Stars have been called for an embellishment penalty.
I hate the embellishment penalty, especially when it turns into the 4-on-4, because I think it's one or the other. Yeah. Like, he's getting hit in the back, and the fact that later on they're like repairing the ice at the spot that it happened probably makes you believe that I don't think Mason Marchment was embellishing there. So I don't think it had too much of a consequence, but this could have been one of those where if Dallas goes on the power play, they could have really put a kind of chokehold on this game much earlier than they did. But yeah, I hate the embellishment call.
It is interesting how many times you see when the games get close in the playoffs, how many times you see the officials be like, if it's anything that is close, how many times you see them say, all right, we're taking one from each side. Yeah. Like we're going to just err on the side of caution and make sure that we get one guy from each side as opposed to giving somebody a power play. But I think that speaks to, at this point, all the teams that are left are usually pretty adept on special teams and pretty adept at capitalizing on any opportunity that they get, except in this series between Dallas and Edmonton, because both power plays have been, for the most part, held in check.
Yeah, I agree with that. And that's, as you kind of move on the series, right? Every power play, every call becomes more and more focused and highlighted and more important. So I get that aspect, and I don't want to see a parade to the box where they're calling every little infraction. And again, I get the 4-on-4 here, where it's you rather be for the refs, right? You rather err on caution, but the embellishment's such a bad call.
Yeah.
Well, I keep going back to that because it's like the dude's getting cross-checked in the back. And if it was the other way, like I don't care who was getting cross-checked here. If it was the other way around, it's no skin off my teeth on who's getting cross-checked here. But like it's just like if it's a dive and like the guy like kind of gets poked, and then it's not a trip, right? It's a dive. That's an embellishment. Like here, if he's like getting like lightly tapped and he just goes flying, if it's like NBA, LeBron James in the paint, or James Harden more likely, but it's one or the other. Like 95% of the time it's one or the other, but I get what they're doing here, and you don't want to make this about the special teams and a ref show where it's each team has like 7 power play opportunities like we see a lot in the AHL, but I get it can't be both.
No, one, and it's not even one or the other. It's one or like that's the only outcome. Like it's a cross check.
It's a cross check.
Let's talk about Edmonton a little bit here. Obviously now down 2-1, and after seeing a 2-0 lead kind of slip out of their fingers, if you are a fan of the Oilers, or if you are somebody that covers the team, watches closely, do you have a level of concern at this point, or is this just a situation that you kind of flush and you move on to game 4? Like if you're on the Oilers side of things, where are you at after how that game played out?
I think you have to be concerned. There are some optimism. I think some things you can cling to, and I think Connor McDavid has started to look better. I don't think he's fully healthy, and we've seen that all playoffs where we haven't really gotten. We talked about this last week, where we haven't really gotten the Connor McDavid game, right? Where he just is like, jump on, boys, I got this, right? And I think this was the best game of the series that we've seen out of him. And you hope that maybe as the series goes on, he gets healthy. But I don't know how Edmonton contains Dallas, right? Especially with their depth. And again, tonight it was Jason Robertson. Next game it could be Logan Stankoven, or it could be JB Ben, or it could be Joe Pavelski, who's had a really quiet playoffs. Like it seems like any time it's almost like the little boy in the dam, right? You plug one hole and then another one springs over here. And I just don't know if Edmonton has the answers to continue to plug all these holes before Dallas just overwhelms them.
Yeah, I agree. I look at it this way. Now that Roope Hintz is back in the lineup, and that slots this Dallas offense kind of into their normal flow, like Edmonton can throw everything they have at the Robertson line, but you still have, as we saw all season, you've still got way more guys lurking that can take advantage. And, a guy like Darnell Nurse for the Oilers, a -2 in this game. Like this is just how teams operate in the postseason, is that if you have a soft spot on defense, they will exploit it. Like they will find a weakness and be able to turn it into an opportunity on the other end. And just with the waves that the Stars can hit you with offensively, it's harder to cover some of that up. And so you are operating against a team that can truly roll like 3 really good lines at you. And not to say that the 4th line isn't good, but like you can lean on those top 3 lines if you're Dallas, and you feel really good about the outcome. And as we talked about, as this series gets started, Edmonton cannot do that. Like they can certainly match, top 6, but I think that third line especially is just a difference maker in this series.
Yeah, and I would keep an eye on the Marchment, Pavelski, Duchesne line played 10 minutes at 5v5. They had 14-4 shot attempts, 6-2 actual shots on goal, 10 scoring chances, and were held off the score sheet. So if they continue to play like that, they're going to break through. And I wouldn't be surprised if next game, that's the line where we're talking about like, oh, look, it's their turn tonight. So they just... Edmonton, again, you solve one problem and then you're dealing with another. And that's why as we've said last week, said this week, just Dallas looks like a machine right now that you just can't stop.
Yeah, it's I'll never count out McDavid and Draisaitl, but it definitely feels like they're kind of moving.
It's looking late, very early here, or looking early, whatever it is. Yeah.
I love that saying. We have had a couple of coaching hires that are making news. One official that was just announced this past weekend, and one that has been leaked that will be announced by the team making the decision. So we'll talk about those names, and one that seems to be left out of this coaching search. We'll talk about all that to finish today's episode of Locked On NHL after this. One final segment of today's episode of the Locked On NHL podcast. Once again, we are your team every day, and we thank you for making Locked On NHL your first listen each and every day. JD, we've had a couple of coaching hires that have been made here since we had a chance to talk last.
And they've all been fired so far because they got NHL coaching. Breaking news: they've all been fired.
Now we get to start the search for the next names. Yes. Winnipeg Jets officially announcing Scott Arniel as their head coach. I hope I'm pronouncing that right.
Don't ask me. I'm terrible with as any Locked On Sharks fan will tell you, I am terrible at pronouncing people's names. So we're sorry, Scott Arniel.
So that's one. And this is I was thinking about this. I actually made an appearance on another show in the Minnesota market talking about this exact same situation. And let's talk about this one first before we move into Seattle. And then we'll kind of finish with what San Jose is going to do. This feels like Winnipeg committing to continuity. Over the last couple of years. This definitely feels like the Jets are trying to extend what Rick Bowness has put in and established, because Arniel was an assistant with Bowness over the last couple of seasons. It very much feels like, okay, we want to continue what Bowness put in over the last couple of seasons. Now, there may be some philosophical changes because Bowness had been in the NHL for quite a while, but Arniel's been in the league for a while too, both as he played and then now as an assistant. He's made multiple stops over his coaching career as well. So I wouldn't expect we see a ton of difference from Winnipeg over the last couple of years to this season, but this is, I think, a big testament to what Winnipeg thinks of the job Rick Bowness did, that they just want to keep that rolling.
Yeah, Winnipeg just kind of feel, I mean, even if you look back to their moves, right, where it felt coming into last offseason, like this is the year they're finally going to blow up. And what do? They just extend everybody and just like, well, let's just keep this going. And they had a really good season and got bounced in the first round. It feels like with Winnipeg, they're just trying to, no pun intended, just keep the runway for this Jet as long as possible before the wheels finally fall off. And as a team that has watched a fan of a team that tried to do that as well, it's going to come crashing down at some point. But again, like if the players like him, he's going to probably have pretty close to the same situation, I would, and I assume the philosophies are probably going to be pretty similar. I guess it's just roll it back, right? It's a safe pick, I would say, right? And that's what coaching, a lot of GMs and owners and stuff, they're just going to go with the safe pick when it comes to head coaches, because we see the same 40 names recycled over and over. So,
yeah. And speaking of a name that has had some run in the NHL. Over the last couple of decades, it has been reported, and the Seattle Kraken announced that they were having a press conference, and one Elliot Friedman reported, amongst others, that it is expected that Dan Bylsma will be named the next head coach for the Seattle Kraken in a press conference happening today. He was the Stanley Cup. He was the head coach for the Stanley Cup winning Pittsburgh Penguins back in 2009, and has gone 7 seasons since his last head coaching gig. But he's bounced around. He's been an AHL coach, so it's not like he's, he didn't Mike Babcock it, where he just is out of the NHL for 5 years and then comes back. I was interested with this one too, because it seems like things were lining up that Dean Evison was going to get the Seattle job. He had links to Ron Francis, but Bylsma's got the pedigree as a Stanley Cup winning head coach. Like, that obviously has an appeal. And like you said, there are guys that have been in those coaching circles that get, the tires kicked on them, and it feels like that's the similar situation here.
I actually really like this hire for the Kraken, especially watching what he's done with Coachella, their AHL affiliate. Their first season, they go to the AHL finals. They lose to Hershey, I believe. They're again in the Final Four. Now I think they're playing Milwaukee, if I recall correctly. And yes, that's, I'd say, a little bit more veteran-laden AHL team compared to some others. But he knows how to win, right? He gets winning, and wherever he goes, they seem to win. And plus, you're already working with some of your future players like Shane Wright, who we expect to make an impact next year with the Seattle Kraken. And I like guys who've kind of worked through these AHL years, especially for a team like the Kraken, who I know they had success last season, and then this season kind of took a step back. But I still feel like that team is in their rebuild type, or not rebuild, but in their building type of phase, and having a coach who's, I think, can develop some of these younger players, I think it's going to put them in a position to succeed long term. And he has the ring, right? You can always point to that and be like, I've been there, done it. So I think I really like this hire for the Kraken. I think it's going to be good for them. The Kraken just seem like a really smart organization. Everything they do just seems smart and kind of ahead of other people. So I think it's a great hire for them.
Yeah, this is a good bounce back after the kind of rumblings behind the scene of what happened that led to Dave Hackstall's dismissal. Feels like a good way to bounce back. Now, the big question that remains, because there's really one spot that remains in terms of finding a new head coach. Are the San Jose Sharks going to pair up with one of the remaining, although there are still some real good remaining candidates out there? What are the Sharks going to do to fill that bench boss role?
I believe they're going to go with a younger coach. I think Mike Greer wants to find a coach to grow with his group, right? Will Smith has been reported that he's going to sign his ELC and join the Sharks this year. Of course, you have Macklin Celebrini. So you have 2 players, 19 and younger, to pair with guys like William Eklund, Fabian Zetterlund, Henry Thrun. You have a ton of young players coming or on the roster or on their way to being on the roster. I think Mike Greer is looking at this long term, where he wants to grow this thing the right way. The 3 names, Ryan Warsofsky, who was the Sharks assistant coach, was also the Chicago Wolves head coach a couple seasons ago when they won the Calder Cup in the AHL. you're also seeing former Shark, Marco Sturm, who's been the bench boss of the AHL Ontario Reign. He was famously part of the Joe Thornton trade. I know he had his interview as well. Really did great work with the German national team, kind of building and growing that program. And then Jeff Blashill, who was the former Red Wings head coach and he's been through the rebuild life, of course. So those are the three names right now who have all been interviewed and kind of are the three that we're looking at for Sharks. But I think Marco Sturm and Wazowski, or Ryan Warsofsky, not Mike Wazowski, Ryan Warsofsky are the two guys to kind of take a look at here, as they're guys who are known for their development and kind of helping younger players kind of to reach their goals. And I think that's if I'm Mike Greer, I assume that's probably where he's going to be heading, is one of those two guys. So
yeah, that makes a ton of sense for where the Sharks are at. Like you don't need somebody with a ton of NHL experience at this point. That's the route you go after you kind of get all the eggs in the basket. And you're like, hey, we need somebody that's done it before to show all these young kids how to do it.
Yes.
So I think that's a good plan. And we'll see how it turns out, because we continue to keep an eye on all things Western Conference for you on this Western Conference Tuesday edition of Locked On NHL. So make sure that you don't miss any big news on any Western Conference team by liking today's video, subscribing on YouTube, or following us on your favorite audio platforms. We've got you covered every Tuesday, as well as all week long for Locked On NHL at large. So make sure to tune in so you don't miss out on any new episodes. We've got you covered Monday through Friday as part of the Locked On Podcast Network.